The alien queen towered over him, her iridescent skin shimmering under the bioluminescent glow of the throne room. Her elongated, elegant form was both mesmerizing and terrifying, her piercing violet eyes studying him with amusement. "You wish to mate with me, human?" Her voice was smooth, yet laced with a dangerous edge. Ethan swallowed hard, but his resolve didn't waver. He had fought his way through the trials, proving his worth among the strongest warriors of the Zintari species. Now! He stood before their queen, his fate hanging in her hands. "I do," he said, his voice steady. "If your kind respects strength, then let me prove I am worthy in every way." A slow, predatory smile spread across her lips. She stepped closer, her claws tracing the edge of his uniform, the heat of her presence sending a shiver down his spine. "Then remove your clothes, human," she purred, amusement flickering in her gaze. "Let us see if your kind can truly handle the desires of a Zintari queen." Ethan took a breath, knowing that this was more than just pleasure. It was survival, diplomacy, and a battle of dominance all in one, and he intended to win. Ethan's heart pounded as he gripped the edge of his uniform. The queen's demand wasn't just a test of bravery. It was a challenge, a game of power between species. He could feel the gazes of the Zintari nobles watching, their glowing eyes filled with curiosity and skepticism. Slowly, he peeled off his jacket, his muscles tensing under the alien air that was slightly cooler than Earth's. The queen's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Interest? Amusement? He couldn't tell. "You hesitate," she teased, stepping closer. Her scent, a mix of something floral and electric, wrapped around him. "Are you afraid, human?" Ethan met her gaze and smirked. "No, just wondering if you're ready for what comes next." A ripple of amusement spread through the crowd, but the queen's expression darkened with intrigue. In one swift motion, she reached out, her claws tracing the bare skin of his chest, testing, feeling. "Bold," she murmured. Perhaps too bold. Her other hand shot forward, gripping the back of his neck with a firm but controlled strength. Ethan held his ground, his body rigid. "Let us see if you can endure the pleasures and the pain of a Zintari queen." The queen's grip on Ethan's neck tightened just enough to assert dominance, her claws grazing his skin like the promise of a deeper touch, or a deadly strike. The room was silent, the Zintari nobles watching with barely concealed fascination. None had ever seen a human challenge their queen's authority, let alone offer himself as a mate. Ethan refused to break eye contact. If this was a battle of will, he would not lose. His breath was steady, his body still, waiting for her next move. Her lips curled into a smirk. "Interesting. Most males tremble before me." He chuckled, a low, defiant sound. "Maybe you've never met a human like me." Her glowing violet eyes flared with heat. In one swift motion, she pulled him closer, her alien strength undeniable. Their bodies were inches apart, his warmth contrasting with her cooler skin. "You seek to impress me," she whispered, her breath brushing against his ear. "But mating with a queen is not a mere act of pleasure. It is a war of dominance." Ethan smirked. "Then let's see who conquers who." The watching nobles murmured, some in shock, others in delight. The game had truly begun. The queen's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something primal flashing across her face. The air between them pulsed with unspoken tension. Power against power, challenge against challenge. "You do not fear me," she mused, her fingers tracing the lines of his jaw with slow, deliberate movements. "Foolish or fearless, I have yet to decide." Ethan held her gaze, unwavering. "Maybe a bit of both." A hushed murmur rippled through the watching nobles. No one spoke to their queen this way. Yet instead of anger, she let out a low, sultry laugh, a sound that sent a strange thrill down his spine. "Very well, human." Her claws trailed down his chest, stopping just above his heart. "But understand this. Mating with a Zintari queen is not for the weak. If you fail, you will not leave this chamber alive." Ethan smirked. "Then I guess I have no choice but to survive." Her lips parted slightly, her amusement turning into something deeper. Curiosity? Hunger? Perhaps both. With a sudden, fluid motion, she turned, her long, elegant form gliding toward the throne. She glanced back, eyes glowing with challenge. Come then, human. Prove you are worthy of my touch. Ethan followed, his pulse steady despite the weight of every noble's gaze on him. This wasn't just a ritual, it was a spectacle, a test, a game with the highest stakes. The queen's movements were fluid, predatory, her form bathed in the soft glow of the bioluminescent chamber. She settled onto her throne, reclining with effortless dominance. Her violet eyes locked onto him. Humans are fragile, she said, tapping a clawed finger against the armrest. Their bodies weaker than ours. Their endurance, questionable. Ethan smirked, stepping closer. You might be in for a surprise. She arched a brow. Bold words. But words mean nothing without action. With a flick of her wrist, the chamber darkened slightly, the glow shifting to a deeper hue. A test. A shift in the atmosphere. He could feel it. The way the air thickened with something unseen, the way the nobles leaned forward in anticipation. The queen tilted her head, her sharp gaze drinking him in. Kneel, human. Ethan hesitated only for a breath, before lowering himself onto one knee before her. Not in submission, but in strategy. A silent declaration. He would play her game, but he would play to win. A murmur rippled through the gathered Zinthari nobles. No human had ever knelt before their queen, not like this. Submission would have been expected. Fear would have been natural. But Ethan's posture was different, controlled, calculated, not the kneel of a servant, but the stance of a warrior awaiting his moment to strike. The queen's eyes gleamed with amusement, perhaps even something darker. She leaned forward, her cool fingers grazing his chin, tilting his face up so their eyes met. You kneel, yet your spirit does not, she mused. Curious, Ethan held her gaze. I don't kneel out of weakness, your majesty. I kneel to show you I'm not afraid. The corners of her lips curled into a slow, predatory smile. Brave words, human. She traced a claw down his jawline. Not enough to wound, just enough to remind him of her power. But courage alone will not save you. Do you understand what it means to take me as your mate? Ethan's smirk didn't waver. You keep asking if I understand the risk. Maybe you should ask yourself if you're ready for mine. The queen exhaled sharply, something like a laugh or a challenge. Then let us find out. The queen's gaze darkened with intrigue as she rose from her throne, stepping down until she stood over him once more. The chamber was silent, every noble watching, waiting. She reached out, her fingers tangling in his hair, tilting his head back further. You play a dangerous game, human. Ethan smirked. So do you? Her grip tightened for a moment before she released him, turning away. Then let us see if you can endure what comes next. A door behind the throne slid open, revealing a chamber bathed in violet light. She glanced back. Follow me, if you dare. Ethan rose to his feet without hesitation, his pulse steady as he followed the queen into the chamber. The air inside was different, warmer, charged with an almost electric energy. Strange symbols pulsed along the walls, casting eerie shadows that danced across her iridescent skin. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. This is the proving ground, she said, where words end and truth begins. Ethan stepped closer. Then let's get to the truth. Her lips curled into a smirk. Very well, human. If you truly wish to claim me, you must first survive me. The door sealed behind them. A deep hum vibrated through the chamber, the air thick with unseen energy. Ethan's muscles tensed as the queen circled him, her violet eyes gleaming with something between challenge and hunger. You've shown bravery, she said, her voice a silken whisper. But strength alone is not enough. Suddenly, she struck, fast as lightning. Ethan barely dodged, her claws slicing through the air where his throat had been. He grinned. Testing my reflexes? She smirked. Testing your worth. Ethan steadied himself, heart pounding. This was no mere ritual. This was survival. And if he wanted her, he had to prove he could take her. Ethan exhaled slowly, every muscle coiled, as the queen prowled around him. This wasn't just a challenge. It was a battle of dominance, of worth. The Zenthri queen would not accept a mate who could not match her, who could not survive her. She lunged again, faster this time. He sidestepped, barely avoiding her claws before catching her wrist. For a split second, their bodies pressed together, the heat of the moment burning between them. She twisted free, but not before he smirked. Not bad, he teased. Her eyes flared with something dangerous. You think this is over? She struck again, but this time, Ethan didn't evade. Instead, he caught her, using her own momentum to spin her, pinning her against the chamber wall. His breath was heavy, their faces inches apart. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then, she smiled a slow, knowing smile. Perhaps you are worthy after all, human. Ethan grinned. Told you. The chamber lights dimmed, the ritual complete. He hadn't just survived. He had won her respect, her challenge, and maybe something more. The queen leaned in, her voice a whisper against his lips. Then claim your prize,